Hey guys, what is up? It's me, Cross Studios here, and I'm here with part 2 of how to sort your Lego pieces. And today I'm going to be going into many different accessories, weapons, and different things along those lines, and my version of how to sort those pieces, and I'll be explaining the way I do it, talking about the advantages and disadvantages of doing certain things when it comes to sorting your Lego pieces. So stay tuned if you're having any problems with your Lego pieces or just want some different methods or possibilities on how to sort them. So the first thing I recommend when it comes to sorting your accessories and different things that involve Lego minifigure weapons or things they just use when it comes to Lego sets, I recommend using these very durable organizers. They're actually, a lot of the times these are used for holding nails and things like that, screws, bolts, different things like that, and you'll find these kinds of things in Lowe's and Home Depot. But they definitely work really well for holding Legos and making sure nothing spills into the other areas. The bead ones are good, but typically I find them to be a bit weaker. Like these ones are pretty durable, but the disadvantage is you can't move any of the places. They just kind of have to stay in the same spot. So that's one thing I'd recommend when it comes to organizing these things. One very important tip when it comes to organizing your weapons and things like that, I try to keep them organized by time period. So what I mean by that is I have high-tech things in one area and I have low-tech things in one area. Two very generic categories that I can kind of fit everything into, because with high-tech I can fit modern and futuristic weapons and things like that. So like high-tech guns, high-tech stud shooters, anything you want, high-tech armor. And I also, but on the other hand, I keep swords, spears, ninja blades, all kinds of stuff in one area, just so when I'm looking for them, I'm not mixing them up, and it helps me organize them a lot better and get to them quicker, just to have everything kind of organized in this way. So I'll start with the medieval weapons. The medieval weapons are something that I've always had pretty organized in my collection. So here's the way I do it. So I have basic swords in one area. So this means like knight swords, hobbit swords. I have some maces and things like that in here. So basically, just any type of normal sword that you want to get is going to be in here. Now you can see they're all this very simple one-handle sword blade. Now you can see there's also swords in here. You're probably wondering what I do with this. Now, a lot of times when I get Lego sets, I'll find swords that sometimes are a bit too big or bulky. Here's an example. This is a Nexo Knight sword, and it's really big, bulky. Don't really use it very often. You get a lot of these in sets. These are probably one of my least favorite swords to get in sets, honestly. They're just kind of big and bulky looking. If it'll focus, you can see what that looks like. You'll get some of these big swords, and then we also have these swords right here. You can see just the trend with these is that they're bigger, bulkier, kind of get in the way. So I try to put all those in one spot just so they're not getting in the way when I'm looking for smaller swords such as these. So that's one really big thing that I recommend with those. Another thing is ninja swords. Now, I have a lot of Ninjago sets over the years and different sets that have these in them, so I just have literally their own spot for them. So that's one thing that I like to do with those. Another important tool I have in here when it is axes and axe blades and things like that. I actually keep the axe blades in one specific spot. So anything that has to do with these little axe blades will go inside of here, no matter what color, even if they're clear, which I guess you could consider high-tech, but I really don't. I just kind of put them in there. Now, one thing that I like to do is I like to keep the sticks, these long stick pieces, right next to them. So if I ever want to make an axe, a full axe, I can literally just go right here, pick out my color of axe stick, and then go right here, pick out my axe blade. Now, that's one thing that's definitely important when it comes to those weapons, is just being able to very quickly go and get things and make it organized. And keep your momentum going when it comes to building Legos. Because sometimes if it just takes too long to get things done, you really don't feel like motivated in continuing your project. So I find that's one thing I like to do. Same thing with this. I kind of group together a lot of bigger weapons in here. Things like this, big pieces. So these are even bigger than the swords, but these aren't really swords. These are like big axes. We got some big clubs, I think, like that. You can see we have a club right here. Different weapons like that. So another thing I do, these are all pretty simple. I keep old-fashioned guns in here, so any type of flintlock, old-fashioned pistols, anything like that. I keep crossbows and bow and arrows in this spot right here. Eventually, I want to get these separated where it's crossbows and bow and arrows in different spots. Up here, we have big, bulky spears and staffs. So mostly staffs in here. And then this is like the main spear area. So that's pretty much how I separate my old-fashioned weapons. Oh, one more thing. We have ninja stars in here. Just a small little area for these. Now, my weapons are a bit of a different story when it comes to high-tech weapons. You can see it's very different looking. Now, you're probably wondering, where is old-fashioned armor and shields? Now, I actually did have their own spots for those, but due to bin space currently, I actually ended up having them with the high-tech stuff, since I don't have as many high-tech weapons as old-fashioned weapons. So you can see I have the old-fashioned armor in here, but at the same time, as long as you know what you're doing and you remember where things are at, that's all that matters. So I guess having armor, both types, I have high-tech armor and low-tech armor, both in one area, so I can go get those at any time. And I also have shields in here as well. So those two kind of coincide with each other, so that's kind of why I decided to put them in here. So moving on to the actual rest of this, you can see we have a lot of things. These right here are just tools. Now, there are a lot of different things you can classify as tools. So we have like a toolbox, we have a hammer, a saw, hooks, eyeglasses, telephones, anything like that, you can kind of classify as a tool. And I like to use those a lot. You can see we have syringes, but anything that you use to fix things or repair things for a minifigure, we got scissors, anything along those lines, I try to keep in one spot because they kind of all coincide with the same type of idea when it comes to what they're going for. They're kind of for like a city setting maybe, or just someone who's going throughout their daily life doing something. So I try to keep all that stuff in one area. And then the rest of this is pretty much weaponry. You can see we have pistols over here, so high-tech pistols. Most of these are Clone Wars. You can see over here we have long blasters. These are all the Star Wars types because I had a lot of these. And then in here, this is kind of a bunched group. We've got big guns. Now, these things can be a bit of a wreck to go through just because they're so big and bulky. They're kind of like the big swords that I was talking about earlier. So I try to keep these in one spot. I kind of group the harpoon guns with them because I don't really use them very often. So I don't really go looking for them. But if I do need them, they're right here. Another thing I like to do is I like to keep my stud shooters with the high-tech weapons. To me, that just makes sense. Even the brick ones right here. I keep all these in the same spot in case I need them for vehicles or if I need them for minifigures. This should be here. But in this area, we have space guns. Now, by a space gun, you can mean a few things with that. You can see we have two different types of blasters right here. We have both of these were used in Galaxy Squad, Alien Conquest, and things like that. So you can see the type of general idea on how I sort these. It just depends on how many things you have as well. Sometimes, like, I'm sure not everyone has as many of these, and maybe other people have more of one thing, but like I said, it all depends on what you have in your collection. So amounts are a big thing. So if you have something that you know you're gonna have more of, make a big spot for it, and don't just do it based off of this unless it coincides with your collection. So let's move on. Now, these two bins are kind of wildcard bins. They're things that maybe would fit with other areas. Maybe they'd fit with the high-tech weaponry. Maybe they'd fit with the low-tech stuff. Maybe they'd even fit with the minifigure parts. But they're things that either A, I have a lot of, or B, I do not use very often. So that's why I keep them in these. And it's not necessarily the rule for everything in these bins, but I do keep them in here just because either the amount of them is right, or based on those circumstances that I said before. So opening this up, you can see the rule applies to a few things. I guess you could classify handcuffs as a tool, but I have a lot of that specific handcuff piece. So I decided having them in one specific spot would be a lot easier than bunching them in with the rest of the tools and kind of making a lot of room. Same thing with these wrench pieces right here. I have these in a special spot. Lightsaber blades, you could technically count that as a high-tech weapon, but due to spacing and things like that, I wanted to put them in their own little area. So these specific saw pieces, I don't really use them very often, but having them in one spot for me to go to, binoculars, these basic guns that, they're not really guns, but they can be used as handlebars, anything like that. We got TNT, we have walkie-talkies. You can see there's actually some other sword pieces in here. Kind of like these clear sword Ninjago pieces, jade blade piece. But you can see kind of how I do it. Just a lot of different things in here that maybe you wouldn't necessarily want to put with your other stuff because it would take up a lot of room or you just don't use it that often, but still you want to have a specific spot for them. We have a very similar situation when it comes to this bin. We have a lot of different things in here. So up in this corner, we have Minecraft items. Now, I have a special spot for those because if I'm really looking for Minecraft items and I want to make a Minecraft set, having all those mixed in different areas is not going to benefit me. So if you know you have a certain theme of some sort that you want to keep separated and it's an accessory, I definitely recommend doing that. Don't be afraid to do that just because other people aren't doing it. I think it's a really good thing to do. You can see I have like chrome pieces and things like that. These are wands and little different magical items like that. I have those in one little spot. I have feet accessories in one spot. These are another one of those weapons, or not weapons, but accessories I wanted to keep separate, even though I could have mixed them in. Another big sword thing that I really didn't want to mix them with the big swords. These are Chima swords. I never use them, but I still want to have them in a spot. Same thing with wing pieces. I actually did use wing pieces on Pit and Dark Pit minifigures recently from my Super Smash Bros. Series. If you haven't seen that series, go ahead and check that out. It's super cool. Make all the characters from Smash Bros. But I used those wings for those characters. And then on top of it, we also have a few more things up here, such as blades. These are kind of like little dagger blade pieces. These are little hand pieces for hand accessory minifigures. And we also have batarangs, which I have a large amount of. So it's like I want to keep those in one spot and not mix them in. So you can see how I kind of sort this stuff in here. They're all things I wanted to keep separate, and maybe they're either bulky or they just have the perfect amount of space to fit in here. And that's why I chose this spot for them. Another thing I wanted to specify is when it comes to separating tools, this is another kind of tool subset. You can see I have brooms, pickaxes, shovels, this is even a wooden paddle. Lots of different things all kind of grouped into one area. But they all work out because I don't necessarily use these accessories very often. But if I do need them, I know exactly where they're at. Same thing with this over here. You're probably wondering, what is this big mess in here? Now, I will explain. It's an organized mess in my own eyes. So you can see I have kind of like string, whip, and anything like that type of accessories. So you can see I have string, I have whips, I have fishing poles, I have Lego rubber bands, and they're kind of all just bunched in here. I know it's kind of a messy fit, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this if you have the space otherwise to put them somewhere else. But I have them all in this area just because it's hard to make a lot of space because I actually don't have any more space currently. But if I did get more bins, I would recommend kind of sorting through this stuff and putting them in their own area. It's just that fishing poles and things like that are kind of bulky and take up a big space. So I figured I might as well just put them all in here for now. Moving on to one of my favorite accessory areas, which is the food and dish section. And we've got all kinds of crazy stuff in these. Now, it kind of just depends on what you classify what as. Now, I keep food and actual dishes separate. So you can see any type of food item that, or at least could be considered a food item, even a pumpkin. I've got all that stuff in here. And you can see even these little pieces I maybe would consider a pastry or something along those lines. I have all those in here. Now in here I have cups, bowls, plates. Now for me, it's a lot easier than just having all this stuff in one big thing because it makes it a lot easier to just say, oh, I want specifically food. I'm going to go in here and pick it out. Or I want specifically a cup. I'm going to go in here and find it, and it'll be a lot easier than going through two things at once. And this one is kind of a mixture of a lot of things. I kind of consider this one to be home accessories. Now, what I mean by a home accessory is things that you'd see in like city scenes and things like that. So I've got literally a movie scene piece. I've got a painting thing, a Lego city box, a piece of resistance for Emmett. We got a trumpet, a Lego baby, a laptop, a hairbrush. Now, some of these things, yeah, you could consider them tools, but they're kind of specific pieces and you don't have a lot of them, so I wanted to keep them separate. Like I said, it all depends on the availability of your pieces, and sorting them is what comes to mind for me when I sort these pieces, and it's a really big deal to make sure they're separated. The next thing I want to go over is treasure. Now, treasure is another area that really is something I don't use often, but I still like to have spots for. So you can see in here I have clear treasure and little gems and things like that. But in here I have gold and silver treasure. Now that's kind of how I sorted it. Other people can do it different ways, but I find this way to be the best way just because most of the time when I'm looking for treasure, I don't want to look through all this stuff at once because it's just so annoying to try and go through to find a specific piece I'm looking for. So I keep those separated. There's not really much to it. That's just how I do it, unless there's a better way. And also up here you can see there's a little section. I have longboards and things like that, sports stuff. I don't have a lot of them, so I'll keep them in that area. So as everyone knows, minifigure accessories are very abundant, and there's just so many different sections you could go over. And I'm just going to leave this here so you guys can kind of look at how I sort these things. I'm not going to say too much about this section. You guys were probably wondering from the last video, where do you keep your legs that are short legs or woman dress legs or long legs and things like that. You can see I have sections for those because I don't have a lot of them. But you can see some of the other things I sort. They're just kind of odd pieces. I sort my fire by big fire. I sort animals. I sort sea creatures. I sort flags. These are Minecraft micro mobs. I sort these little torch pieces. That's just kind of some subsets of what I organize, and you don't necessarily have to organize these things, but they are definitely things that I like to organize. Continuing that trend, here are a few more minifigure accessory areas that I like to sort. So you can see I have Chima, weird axe and stabbing pieces, I guess you could call them. I never use these things, like almost ever, but I want to have them out of the way, so I never have to see them, honestly. I never use them, but I do have a spot for them. You can see I have Chima hats in here. Didn't want to put those with the helmets. I've got Chima armor over here, and as well as custom medieval armor from custom brick companies like Brick Warriors, Brick Arms, different stuff like that. And you can even see I got lightsaber blades and other stuff like that. I will go into some of these other things once I get to those. You can say I even have sports balls and balls like this in this area. I'll get to chairs and things like that eventually when I get to specialty pieces in a different video. But just know that I kind of keep them in this area. Another big thing I definitely recommend putting in a different spot is these types of helmets. Astronaut helmets, big bulky helmets. Put them either in a bag or in a big spot, because they will get in the way when you're looking for helmets. If you have all of your helmets in one spot, these things are going to be a pain to stick your fingers through and look through them to try and find things at the bottom of the pile. Now, I also have my high-tech custom weapons in here as well. Like I said, Brick Warriors, Brick Arms, different companies like that. And the last small section I want to talk about in this video is actually, you could consider it a minifigure accessory, but I kind of just put it with the regular accessories just because it's easier, and I keep all of my capes in one spot. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of these things. I think a good way to do it is also by sorting it in a bag, and it's not a bad way to do it either. Sorting through this is really easy too. It doesn't really matter too much how you sort these. You kind of just have them in a spot so you can get to them, because capes are definitely a very heavily used thing. So I like to have all those in one specific area. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. I will be doing probably specialty pieces and different things like that coming up in another video. Then I'll eventually get into my bulky big pieces and actual colored pieces and things like that. But for now, I'm sticking with the minifigure accessories and things like that, because that's one thing I think people like to typically organize first, just so they can get to them. It's something that everyone likes to have organized so they can easily access them. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Tell me in the comments below what you do for your accessory sorting methods and things like that. And thanks for watching.